I never imagined labor would feel like being split in two by invisible hands. The contractions came in violent waves, crashing through me while I clawed at the leather of my husband's car seat, the scent of stale cologne and plastic clinging to the air. My breaths came sharp, ragged, every gasp fogging the windshield as if the night itself was watching me break. He was supposed to be here. Daniel had promised he'd never leave my side, that when the day came, he'd hold my hand and whisper the strength I didn't have. But the passenger seat was empty, his jacket tossed carelessly on the dash, his phone call unanswered. Each ring ended in the cold finality of voicemail. I dialed again. My fingers trembled, slick with sweat. "Come on, Daniel, please, pick up." Instead, silence. Just the mechanical voice telling me to leave a message, as if my begging wasn't worth more than a beep. Pain twisted through me, worse than before. My nails scraped the car door as another contraction slammed down. I bit down on my lip to stop the scream, but it burst out anyway, raw and helpless. I pressed the speaker button, praying my mother would answer. She picked up on the second ring, her voice firm but worried. "Honey, are you okay?" "Where's Daniel?" I wanted to lie. I wanted to tell her he was getting gas, that he'd run inside for help, that any second now he'd return. But the truth spilled out, bitter and heavy. "He's not here, he's gone." "Gone?" Her voice faltered. "What do you mean, gone?" Through the windshield, the highway stretched into emptiness, a strip of black ribbon under the moonlight. No cars, no lights, just me and the tightening vice around my body. Then, my mother's voice cut the silence, colder than the night air. "He went on vacation, with his parents." Her words struck harder than the contractions. My chest caved, my lungs refused to fill. I stared at the empty seat, the jacket he'd left behind like a mocking stand-in for the man who vowed to love me. Vacation. While I gave birth in his car, alone, my scream tore the air, bouncing off the glass and leather, my own pain echoing back at me. It wasn't just physical. It was betrayal, raw and choking. I remembered the sacrifices I made for him. The night I quit my job because his parents said it didn't look good for their son's wife to work retail. The savings I'd given up so he could invest in a venture with his father. The friends I stopped seeing because he insisted family should be my only focus. Every choice, every compromise, all for this moment. And he wasn't here. "Stay with me on the phone," my mother said, her voice breaking. "We'll get you help. Just breathe. You're strong, sweetheart. You can do this." But I didn't feel strong. I felt abandoned, disposable, like a placeholder until Daniel found someone shinier, someone more acceptable to his family's standards. Another contraction ripped through me, my back arching against the seat. The baby's weight pressed low, urgent, unstoppable. Tears blurred my vision. I fumbled with the glove compartment, desperate for something, anything to ground me. A crumpled receipt fluttered out, stained with grease. It wasn't mine. The date on it mocked me, 2 nights ago. The time stamped 11:47 p.m., a diner off the highway. My stomach clenched, not from pain, but suspicion. Who was he with when I lay awake, timing contractions, clutching the sheets and praying he'd come home? I shoved the receipt back, heart pounding faster than the contractions. My mother's voice was faint now, lost under the roar of betrayal filling my ears. Then I heard it. A distant hum. Headlights in the rearview mirror, growing brighter, closer. For a moment, fear replaced the pain. Alone on a highway, in the dark, vulnerable, I was prey. The car slowed as it neared, its lights flooding the interior of my car. My breath caught. My hands tightened around my belly, as if I could shield my child from whatever came next. The vehicle stopped behind me. A door opened. Footsteps echoed on gravel. Through the glass, I saw the figure approach. Broad shoulders, crisp uniform, the metallic glint of metals catching the moonlight. A Navy Admiral. For a moment, disbelief numbed me. Why here? Why now? Was this some fever dream conjured by exhaustion and betrayal? He stopped beside my door, his face solemn, eyes steady. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he raised his hand. A salute. I froze, breath shallow, tears streaking my face. A salute. To me. To the woman abandoned on the side of the road in the middle of childbirth, I whispered, voice cracked and disbelieving, Why are you saluting me?" The Admiral's gaze didn't falter. His voice was low, steady, almost reverent. Because no one deserves to be left to fight a battle alone. Not tonight. Not ever. My hand trembled against the window. My heart thundered with equal parts fear and relief. For the first time that night, I wasn't alone. But as another contraction seized me, stronger than the rest, a single thought crashed through my mind, sharper than any pain. Where is my husband? The world narrowed into fragments. The cold press of leather against my back, the sour bite of my own breath fogging the window, the screech of another contraction tearing through me. My hands shook as I pressed them against the curve of my belly, whispering words to a child not yet born. Hold on, just hold on for me. And then he was there. The Admiral's face filled the window, lined with age, yet impossibly steady. His cap caught the moonlight, the glint of metals like sparks against the dark. He didn't hesitate. He opened the door with the calm certainty of a man who had walked through fire before. "Breathe with me," he said, voice low, carrying a command but softened at the edges. I gasped, my throat raw. "I can't." He left me. He shook his head once, firmly, silencing the panic clawing at my chest. His hand, rough but careful, pressed against mine. "You can. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Match me." I clung to his voice as though it was the only thing tethering me to this world. Inhale, exhale. The rhythm steadied me, each breath dragging me back from the cliff. It was surreal. A stranger in uniform offering me respect my own husband never had. Daniel. His name seared into me like a wound. I remembered the night he slid a ring onto my finger, his promises falling like golden coins I was foolish enough to collect. "Forever," he'd whispered, tucking my hair behind my ear. "I'll never let you face life alone." But forever to Daniel had conditions. His parents dictated the rules, tightening the leash around my throat. They criticized my clothes, my voice, even the food I cooked. And Daniel, he never defended me. He just stood there, smiling that hollow smile, telling me to be grateful. The Admiral's hand tightened, pulling me back from memory. "Stay with me." "That's it. You're not alone, not alone." The words hit something raw, because I was alone when I gave up my career for Daniel's family image. Alone when his mother sneered at me in her gilded kitchen, saying, "A woman's worth is in how well she keeps her husband pleased." Alone tonight, when the man I trusted more than anyone decided a Greek yacht was more important than his child's first breath. I wanted to scream it at this stranger, this Admiral kneeling in the dirt beside my car. Do you know what he did? Do you know the way he erased me? Instead, a sob clawed free. He left me. The Admiral's jaw flexed, but he didn't look away. Then we fight without him. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a phone. His movements were deliberate, unhurried, as if he knew the steadiness of his hands would transfer to me. "This is Admiral Hayes," he said into the receiver. "I need paramedics on Route 16, mile marker 42. Woman in active labor." Yes, now! His title rolled out like thunder. Admiral. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Daniel should have been here, but instead, fate had sent me a man who commanded ships and men, a man who could summon help with a single sentence. The pain spiked again, hot and merciless. My nails dug crescents into the Admiral's sleeve. I expected him to flinch, to pull away from the mess and the rawness of birth. But he didn't move. He held firm, his other hand pressing lightly against my shoulder. "You're safe. You hear me? Safe." For a moment, the weight of betrayal eased, but the night had sharp edges, and it cut me with a sudden memory. Daniel's parents, their smug smiles at dinner, telling me I should be grateful to marry into a family of such stature. How Daniel had nodded along, agreeing that appearances matter, and here I was, sweating, screaming, abandoned, while they likely toasted champagne on some glittering deck, congratulating themselves for raising a son who chose them over me. The Admiral moved suddenly, shrugging off his jacket. The weight of it settled over me, heavy, warm, smelling faintly of salt water and starch. It swallowed me whole, covering the exposed swell of my body, the vulnerability of my position. For the first time all night, I felt dignity return like a breath of clean air. Tears blurred my vision. Why are you helping me? He crouched lower, his eyes level with mine. Because you deserve more than being left behind. His words were simple, but they cracked something inside me. A truth I'd been too afraid to face. Daniel would never give me more. He never had. A buzzing came from the dashboard, my phone lighting up. For a fraction of a second, hope surged. Maybe Daniel had realized. Maybe he was calling to say he was on his way, but the screen told another story. A message from a blocked number. 4 words that punched through my chest. He isn't coming back. I froze, staring, the letters dancing through tears. My fingers hovered over the screen, trembling. Was it a cruel joke? A warning? Proof that someone out there knew the truth I hadn't yet admitted? The Admiral's voice broke through. Look at me. Don't drift. I snapped the phone shut, shoving it aside. My body wasn't waiting for explanations. The baby was coming, each contraction pulling me closer to a breaking point. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder. Relief mixed with dread. Help was coming, but so was the truth I couldn't escape. I leaned forward, clutching the Admiral's arm. My voice cracked under the weight of everything I couldn't say. Where is my husband? The Admiral's eyes flickered. Something like pity, something like fury. But his silence was louder than any words. And in that silence, I knew. The drive home from the hospital was supposed to feel triumphant. That's what I told myself as I buckled my newborn into the car seat, his tiny hands curling into fists as if he already knew the world wasn't as gentle as it should be. The nurses had wheeled us out with smiles, the other mothers showered with flowers and balloons, their partners rushing forward with cameras and kisses. I had nothing but silence. The Admiral had wanted to follow me home, but I'd shaken my head. Pride, or maybe shame, made me tell him no. This was my house, my family. I wanted to believe I still had that. But when I pulled into the driveway, the front porch was bare. No balloons, no streamers, no sign anyone had been waiting. The lawn was freshly mowed, the hedges trimmed, everything perfectly in place. As though life here had continued without noticing I'd nearly died bringing his child into the world. I carried the baby in one arm, my hospital bag in the other, fumbling with the keys. The door creaked open and the smell hit me first. Not the warm scent of flowers or food waiting in the kitchen. Just polish, lemon cleaner. The sterile scent of a staged home. Inside, the house was spotless. Too spotless. Not a single blanket draped on the couch, not a mug in the sink. It was as though no one had lived here in days. I shifted the baby against my chest, whispering softly, "We're home, little one. We're safe now." My words rang hollow in the empty space. That's when I saw it, a note on the kitchen counter, placed neatly beneath the ceramic fruit bowl Daniel's mother had given us last Christmas. I recognized his handwriting instantly, sharp, precise, controlled. My chest tightened as I unfolded it. Be back soon. Family comes first, that was it. No congratulations, no how are you? Not even the baby's name. Family comes first, my knees buckled. I sank into a chair, clutching the note with shaking fingers. Which family? Not me. Not the child asleep against my shoulder. His family. His parents. Always them. I remembered the first Thanksgiving after our wedding, how he insisted we spend it at his parents' estate instead of with my mother. I remembered the way his mother's perfume filled our bedroom after she'd insisted on redecorating because my taste wasn't suitable. Every decision, vacations, holidays, even the crib we bought, filtered through their approval. And now, as I stared at his words, I realized he wasn't even hiding it anymore. We were not his priority. We never had been. The baby stirred, fussing softly. I looked down at him, guilt crashing over me. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I thought he would change. I thought we mattered enough." I laid him gently in the bassinet by the couch, my body aching from labor, my shirt already stained with milk. Exhaustion weighed me down, but my mind refused rest. I pulled out my phone, desperation clawing at me. Maybe there would be a text, an explanation. Instead, there were photos. Daniel's social media account was a highlight reel of everything I hadn't lived. Him on the deck of a gleaming yacht, champagne in hand, his father beside him in matching sunglasses. His mother wrapped in a silk shawl, her smile smug as ever. Sunlight painted them golden, the ocean sparkling behind them. And then there was Daniel, my husband. Grinning, tanned, carefree. While I screamed in the back seat of a car, he was raising a glass under Mediterranean skies. My breath caught, my vision blurring. I scrolled faster, thumb trembling, each picture another knife. Him laughing at dinner, him leaning against the railing, waves crashing behind him, him dancing. My baby's father, celebrating life while I nearly bled alone. The baby's cry rose, sharp and insistent. I scooped him up, rocking him with one arm while still clutching the phone in the other. My tears dripped onto his blanket, dampening the soft cotton. "It's okay, sweetheart. Mama's here," my voice cracked, "even if no one else is." But then, mid-scroll, I froze. One picture. Not just Daniel and his parents. A woman. She stood beside him, hand looped casually through his arm as if it belonged there. Her hair cascaded over her shoulders, her dress clinging in all the places that drew attention. She wasn't family. She wasn't me. Her hand on his arm. The world tilted. My stomach lurched. For a moment I couldn't breathe. The comments below blurred into noise, emojis of champagne glasses and hearts, congratulations from people who thought nothing was wrong. I zoomed in on the photo, my thumb trembling. His smile, wide, easy, unburdened. And hers was triumphant, as if she had already won. The baby whimpered, and I clutched him tighter, whispering into his hair though my voice shook. "I'll protect you, even if I have to stand alone." But as I stared at that picture, one thought pounded louder than the rest. Who was she? The baby was asleep on my chest when I went back to the photo, the one that had stopped my breath the night before. The woman's hand resting so casually on Daniel's arm. Her smile, sharp enough to slice through my already fragile heart. I zoomed in until the pixels blurred. Every detail mocked me. The way she leaned toward him, the tilt of her chin, the easy confidence of someone who had no reason to hide. My thumb hovered over the screen, unable to swipe away. My phone buzzed with another notification. Likes, comments, endless digital applause for their glamorous trip. Strangers cheering for my husband while I sat in milk-stained pajamas, cradling his newborn son in a house colder than any hotel room. I couldn't stop myself. I started digging. Clicking the yacht's location tag led me down a rabbit hole of strangers' photos. Different angles of the same party, the same ocean, the same golden sun. And there she was again, her dress changing in each picture, but her presence constant. Always close to him, always touching. The comments were worse. "Daniel and his gorgeous friend look amazing." "Couple goals." "Finally moved on?" Each word was a slap. Moved on. From me? From his child. I pressed my hand against my chest, the thrum of my heartbeat uneven. My gaze fell to the hospital bracelet still looped around my wrist. The flimsy plastic tag that bore my name and my son's birth date, proof of what I had just endured. I held it up against the glowing screen. The hospital band, fragile but sacred. Her diamond bracelet, heavy and glittering, catching sunlight on Daniel's arm. Almost identical in shape, one symbolizing survival, the other betrayal. The baby stirred, his small cry cutting through the silence. I pressed a kiss to his forehead. "You're all that matters," I whispered, though my voice trembled. But he doesn't see it. He never saw us. Still, I needed answers. The next morning, bleary-eyed from a night of rocking and pacing, I stepped outside to bring in the trash bin. That's when I saw my neighbor, Mrs. Klein, crouched by her garden. She was older, sharp-eyed, the kind of woman who noticed everything. She straightened when she saw me, her gaze softening as it fell on the baby in my arms. "Back home already? Where's Daniel?" The question was casual, but I heard the edge in it. I forced a brittle smile. "On a trip with his parents," her lips pursed. She wiped dirt from her hands onto her apron. "Again? No wonder." I froze. "No wonder what?" Mrs. Klein glanced at me, then away as if deciding whether to speak. Finally she sighed. "I didn't want to say anything while you were expecting. But I saw him. Several times. Late at night? Not alone." The world seemed to tilt under me. "Not alone?" She shook her head. "There was a woman. Blonde, tall, always dressed like she was going somewhere fancy. They'd leave in his car around midnight, not return until early morning. I thought, maybe it was business, but it didn't look like business. My grip tightened around the baby until he whimpered. "Why didn't you tell me?" Her eyes softened with pity. "Sweetheart, you were so close to giving birth." I thought, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I shouldn't interfere. But now, she trailed off, shaking her head. My throat closed up. I mumbled a thank you, retreating into the house before she could see me fall apart. Inside, I collapsed onto the couch, clutching the baby. My mind replayed her words, overlaying them with the images from the yacht. It was her. It had to be. The woman who had the audacity to flaunt herself publicly was the same one sneaking around our neighborhood while I lay awake, heavy with his child. The betrayal wasn't just abandonment. It was premeditated, planned. I thought of the sacrifices again, how I'd sold my grandmother's locket to help Daniel cover his business debts, how I'd smiled through his parents' cruel remarks, how I'd silenced my own dreams so his could live. And all along, he was building a secret life, brick by brick, with her. Anger burned through the fog of exhaustion. For the first time since labor, I felt more fire than fear. The baby stirred again, and I held him tighter, whispering fiercely, "He doesn't get to take us down. He doesn't get to win." My phone buzzed on the table. I reached for it, half expecting another photo of their smiling faces. But it wasn't that. It was a new notification, an Instagram message request from an account I didn't recognize. I hesitated, my pulse thundering. Finally, I tapped it open. The message was short, just one line. "You deserve to know the truth about your husband." The room spun. I clutched the phone, my breath ragged, the baby fussing in my arms as if he, too, felt the shift, the truth. I stared at the glowing words, knowing everything was about to unravel. The house was quiet except for the rhythmic tick of the wall clock and the soft, uneven breaths of my baby asleep in the bassinet beside me. Night had folded itself over the neighborhood, but my mind refused to rest. My phone glowed on the coffee table, that single anonymous message staring back at me. "You deserve to know the truth about your husband." The words had been echoing in my skull for hours. Now, with the baby finally asleep, I tapped it open. A thread of messages unfolded. My stomach dropped. The first was a photo. Daniel, unmistakable in his tailored blazer, leaning across a candlelit restaurant table. And across from him, the woman from the yacht. The date stamped on the corner burned into me, a full 8 months ago. Before I even knew I was pregnant, I swiped. Another photo. Daniel and the same woman entering a hotel lobby, his hand low on her back, her head tilted toward his shoulder. This one dated 6 months ago, when I was already carrying his child. The next image was worse. Him, shirt rumpled, leaving the same hotel in the early morning. She was beside him, hair tangled, sunglasses covering her eyes. He was smiling, a smile I hadn't seen in months. My throat closed. I pressed a hand to my mouth to stifle the cry that threatened to wake the baby. It wasn't just one mistake. It wasn't some drunken slip he'd beg forgiveness for. This was deliberate, sustained. A second life lived alongside mine, while I built his home, carried his child, and gave up everything. A new notification buzzed, an email forwarded from an anonymous address. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Hotel receipts, dozens of them, each with Daniel's name, his credit card, his signature. Room service charges, double occupancy proof, the dam broke. Tears streaked my face as I hunched over the phone, shaking. I thought of all the nights I'd woken alone, his side of the bed cold, his excuse some late meeting with his father. The times I had defended him when friends whispered he was distant, distracted. How I'd silenced my doubts because I wanted so desperately to believe he loved me. The sacrifices replayed in brutal clarity. Selling my grandmother's locket, the last piece of her I had, just to help Daniel cover an investment loss. Smiling through his parents' endless humiliations. Swallowing my pride when he told me to tone down at gatherings because his family preferred women who were seen, not heard. All while he was pouring himself into her. I pushed myself off the couch, moving on autopilot. Into the small office at the end of the hallway, where Daniel's printer sat untouched. I turned it on, the hum breaking the silence. One by one, I printed everything. The screenshots, the receipts, the photos. The machine spat them out, each sheet a dagger I stacked neatly, carefully, as if order could control the chaos ripping me apart inside. I slid them into a folder, thick and heavy in my hands. This wasn't just evidence. It was my arsenal. The baby stirred, letting out a soft whimper, and I hurried back to scoop him into my arms. His warmth pressed against me, grounding me as I rocked him gently. He was all that mattered. And yet, part of me raged, not just at Daniel, but at myself, for trusting, for sacrificing, for choosing a man who had already chosen someone else. The phone buzzed again, startling me. I glanced at the screen, bracing for another anonymous revelation. But it wasn't that. It was a name I hadn't expected, Admiral Hayes. For a long moment I hesitated, then answered. His voice was deep, steady, like the night on the roadside when he'd kept me breathing. "Just checking in," he said. "How are you holding up?" The question was simple, but it broke something in me. My throat tightened. "I'm trying." He paused, as though weighing his words. "You don't have to tell me the details, but I know the look of someone caring too much alone." I closed my eyes, leaning back against the wall. The baby nestled against me, soft breaths against my collarbone. He's not who I thought he was. I have proof now. More than I ever wanted. The Admiral didn't press. He just let the silence stretch, offering space. That silence felt like kindness, something I hadn't known in years. "You're stronger than you realize," he said finally. "I've seen soldiers collapse under less. But you," his voice softened, "you're still standing. For that child. That matters." I bit my lip, holding back tears. "What if standing isn't enough?" "Then you fight," he said simply. "But on your terms." His words settled in me like steel. I wasn't powerless. Not anymore. I had proof. I had resolve. For the first time, the thought of confronting Daniel didn't terrify me. It fueled me. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet, clutching the folder of evidence. My mind played out scenarios. Lawyers, judges, the humiliation Daniel would face when the truth came to light. The thought of his smug parents watching their perfect son unravel sent a grim flicker of satisfaction through me. I laid the baby in his crib, kissing his forehead softly. "I'll protect you," I whispered. From him, from all of them. But just as I allowed myself that fragile promise, my phone rang again. Daniel. My chest seized. I stared at his name flashing on the screen. The man who had left me in labor. The man smiling on a yacht with another woman. The man whose betrayal now filled a folder on my desk. I answered, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "Hello?" His voice was casual, almost irritated. "I'm coming home. Don't do anything stupid." The line went dead. I stood frozen in the dark, clutching the phone, the baby's soft breathing the only sound in the room. Stupid? My hands tightened around the folder. He had no idea what was waiting for him. The house was dark when the sound of tires crunched against the driveway gravel. My heart hammered as headlights swept across the blinds, scattering jagged light onto the living room wall. The baby stirred in his crib, and I pressed a hand gently against his back, whispering, "It's okay." Mama's here, but I wasn't okay. The front door clicked, and the smell of expensive cologne hit me before I even saw him. Daniel. Suntanned, his skin glowing from foreign sun. A designer suitcase rolling behind him, as though he'd just returned from a business trip, not from abandoning his wife and child. He didn't rush to me. He didn't look at the baby. He just dropped his keys into the bowl by the door, glanced around the spotless house, and sighed. "You look awful," the words sliced through me. My body still ached from labor, my shirt damp with milk stains, my hair unwashed. He hadn't even said hello. No apology, no concern. Just irritation. I stood slowly, the folder of evidence clutched in my hands. "Do you know where I gave birth, Daniel?" He waved dismissively, already heading toward the kitchen. "I don't need the dramatics tonight. I'm exhausted." My voice cracked but grew louder. "In a car, alone, while you were drinking champagne on a yacht." He stopped, turned, his jaw tightening. "My parents needed me. You know how important? I snapped, my voice trembling with rage. "I was bleeding, screaming, bringing your son into this world, and you were smiling in photographs with her." His eyes flickered, just for a second, before narrowing into annoyance. Her? Oh, so you've been snooping. I threw the folder onto the table. The papers spilled out like a storm. Hotel receipts, photos, screenshots. Proof scattered under the harsh kitchen light. This isn't snooping, Daniel. It's the truth. Our truth. He picked up a page, glanced at it, then smirked. Fake? Anyone can make this stuff up. You've always had a flair for exaggeration. The rage that had been building inside me for weeks snapped free. Exaggeration? You left me to deliver our child alone. You left me humiliated, terrified, abandoned, and now you stand here calling me dramatic? He slammed the receipt back down, stepping closer, his voice cold. You think you can shame me with this? My parents will never believe you. Nobody will. You're just the unstable wife who can't handle reality. My legs shook, but I refused to step back. Reality? Reality is the Admiral who held my hand when you wouldn't. Reality is our neighbor who saw you sneaking out at midnight. Reality is this child, your son, who deserves better than a father who runs when things get hard. The baby whimpered, as if sensing the storm between us. I rushed to the crib, scooping him into my arms, pressing him close. Daniel watched, his face unreadable, but his silence screamed louder than words. Flashbacks seared me, selling my grandmother's locket. Swallowing his parents' insults, nights I lay awake alone while he whispered lies about meetings and obligations. Every sacrifice, every humiliation piled into this moment. I turned, my son against my chest. You don't get to gaslight me anymore, Daniel. I have proof, and I won't be silent. Something flickered in his eyes, fear, rage, but he masked it quickly, dragging his suitcase back toward the door. I don't have time for this. If you want to make a fool of yourself, go ahead. But don't say I didn't warn you. Warn me? My voice shook. You left me to die, Daniel. He stopped at the door, his hand on the handle. He didn't turn back. My parents needed me, he said again, softer this time, as if it were his shield, his mantra. Then he was gone, the door slamming shut behind him. The silence after was unbearable. I sank onto the couch, clutching the baby, rocking him against my chest. My tears dampened his blanket, but my arms stayed strong, holding him tighter. We'll be okay, I whispered. We have to be. That's when my phone buzzed. I set the baby gently in the crib, my hands trembling as I reached for the device. The glow of the screen revealed a new email notification. My stomach dropped. The subject line read, Notice of Divorce Proceedings, from the Office of Goldstein and Marks. I opened it, my pulse roaring in my ears. Legal papers? Filed on Daniel's behalf. He wasn't just walking away. He was preparing to erase me entirely. The baby whimpered again, his small cries cutting through the suffocating silence. I pressed a hand against the crib, steadying myself as the words on the screen blurred with tears. This wasn't abandonment anymore. This was war. The morning light slanted through the blinds, painting stripes across the living room floor. It should have been peaceful, the kind of gentle dawn that promises new beginnings. Instead, the silence pressed down heavy, broken only by the faint squeak of my baby's breaths as he slept in the bassinet beside me. On the table, the email from Daniel's lawyer glared from my laptop screen. I'd opened it a dozen times through the night, each word more venomous than the last. Petition for divorce. Grounds, abandonment, abandonment. My hand shook as I scrolled again, though I knew every line by heart. According to Daniel's attorney, I had abandoned him, that I had failed in my marital duties, that I had withheld companionship and stability, that I had chose to be absent from the marriage. I nearly laughed. Except the sound that tore from me was closer to a sob. I had given up everything, my job, my friends, my pride, just to hold together the pieces of his family's perfect image. And he was painting me as the deserter. A soft coo broke through my haze. I turned, watching my son stir in his sleep, his tiny hand twitching beside the edge of the blanket. Innocence wrapped in cotton. Beside him, on the coffee table, lay the printed court papers. Innocence beside corruption. The sight hollowed me out, I whispered to him, though my voice trembled. They're trying to erase us, to make it look like we don't matter. But I knew who they were. This wasn't just Daniel. His parents' fingerprints were all over the legal language, cold, strategic, ruthless. His father had always known which strings to pull. His mother had always known how to twist a narrative until even lies sounded like truth. I remembered the dinner party last year, when his mother had pulled me aside with her glass of wine. "If you ever embarrass our family," she said, her lips curving into a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "we'll make sure you disappear faster than you think." At the time, I'd brushed it off as intimidation. Now, reading the papers, I realized it wasn't a threat. It was a promise. I picked up the folder of evidence I'd built. Screenshots, receipts, photos, proof of betrayal stacked like a shield. But for every page I held, I knew his family had 10 lawyers ready to shred me apart. The thought of walking into court alone made my chest tighten. I wasn't just fighting Daniel. I was fighting the entire machine that had propped him up his whole life. Wealth, power, influence, and me? Just a tired mother with cracked lips, stained clothes, and a baby in her arms. A knock at the door jolted me. My neighbor, Mrs. Klein, stood outside holding a small casserole dish. When I opened the door, her eyes flicked to the papers scattered on the table. "I saw the delivery man leave," she said gently. "Legal documents?" I hesitated, then nodded. She sighed. "Sweetheart, those people, they've always thought they were untouchable. But don't you let them scare you into silence. You've got truth on your side." Her words were kind, but they felt small against the mountain in front of me. After she left, I placed the casserole untouched on the counter, my stomach too knotted for food. The baby began to cry, his wail high and sharp. I scooped him up, pressing him against my chest. Rocking him, I whispered, "It's just you and me now, and they want to take even that away." A memory flashed. Me at the altar, Daniel's hand gripping mine, his voice steady as he promised, "For better or worse, till death do us part." I'd believed it. Believed him. Now those words mocked me. The phone buzzed suddenly. A new email notification. My heart lurched. Another document? Another accusation? I opened it. A scanned page filled the screen, an affidavit signed by Daniel. My eyes caught the words, "She is unfit as a mother." The room tilted. I dropped into the chair, clutching the baby tighter. Unfit. That was their angle. To not just discard me as a wife, but to strip me as a mother. I looked down at my son, his wide eyes blinking up at me, unaware of the battle already being fought over his future. A hot tear slipped down my cheek and landed on his blanket. For a long time, I sat frozen, rocking him, staring at the affidavit. My silence felt like defeat. If I stayed quiet, they would bury me. They would make the world believe I was the one who walked away. But silence wasn't an option anymore. I laid my son gently back in the bassinet, then gathered the folder of proof in my arms. "My arsenal," my voice. And then the phone rang again. I answered, bracing myself. But the voice on the other end was steady, grounding, familiar. "Admiral Hayes." My breath caught. "Admiral?" "I heard," he said simply. "About the papers. About what he's trying to do." My throat tightened. "They're saying I abandoned him, that I'm unfit." The Admiral's voice dropped, calm but edged with steel. "That's their game. They rewrite the story until people forget the truth. But lies don't stand long in front of evidence." My hand tightened around the folder. "I don't know if I can win against them. His parents, they have everything." "You're not fighting this alone anymore," the Admiral said firmly. Then, after a pause, "I think it's time we meet in court." The line clicked dead, but his words hung in the silence like a promise. I looked at my son, sleeping soundly despite the storm around him. And for the first time, I felt a spark of something stronger than fear, not hope, not yet, but resolve. The courthouse smelled of varnished wood and old paper, a place where lives were dismantled and rebuilt under fluorescent lights. My heels echoed against the marble floor as I walked in, my son's small hand gripping mine. His touch was warm, grounding me against the chill that crawled up my spine. The air inside the courtroom was heavy, dense with whispers. Neighbors filled the benches, some leaning forward as though watching a play. Reporters clutched notepads, their eyes sharp with hunger. And in the front row, Daniel's parents sat smugly, dressed in navy and pearls, their posture rigid with entitlement. They didn't look at me. They didn't need to. Their smirk said enough. You've already lost. Daniel stood near the defendant's table, his tan skin still glowing, his suit crisp, his arrogance untouched. His lawyer whispered in his ear, and he nodded with a smirk that was aimed directly at me. I clutched my folder tighter. It was thick now, bursting with evidence. Receipts, screenshots, photos, all the pieces of the double life he thought I would never uncover. My other hand held onto my son's, his small fingers curled trustingly around mine. Innocence tethered to truth. When the judge entered, the room hushed. His gavel cracked once, commanding silence. The case began with Daniel's lawyer. His words slithered through the room, painting me as unstable, neglectful. She abandoned her marital duties. She left her husband without support, without care. She is unfit to raise a child. Each accusation struck like a hammer. My son shifted uncomfortably in his seat beside me, too young to understand, but not too young to feel the tension. My throat tightened. I wanted to scream the truth, but I forced myself still. My time would come. The judge turned to me. Mrs. Warren, do you have evidence to present? I rose, my knees threatening to give way. Every eye in the room burned against my skin as I walked to the stand. I placed the folder before me, its weight solid, unshakable. Yes, Your Honor. My voice trembled at first, but grew stronger. I have proof. I began laying out the pages. Hotel receipts with Daniel's signature, photographs with timestamps, screenshots of his messages. Each one I slid across the table was another piece of armor against his lies. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as the images appeared on the projector screen. Daniel with her. Daniel entering a hotel at midnight. Daniel smiling in photographs while I lay in labor, alone. Daniel's smirk faltered. His face drained, his jaw tightening as whispers swelled behind us. Then the judge asked, "Do you have any witnesses?" For a moment, silence. I thought of Mrs. Klein, of my mother. But then, from the back of the room, the sound of steady footsteps cut through the whispers. I turned. Admiral Hayes. He walked forward in his crisp uniform, medals gleaming under the harsh lights. The crowd murmured, shifting to get a better view. His presence filled the room, commanding attention without a single word. He stopped beside me, saluted the judge, then placed his hand on the Bible. "I was there," he said, his voice carrying like a steady drumbeat. The lawyer narrowed his eyes. "And who exactly are you?" "Admiral Thomas Hayes, United States Navy," he replied evenly. The courtroom stilled. He continued, his tone unwavering. "I found Mrs. Warren abandoned on the roadside, in labor, alone. Her husband was nowhere to be found. I stayed with her until paramedics arrived." The words crashed over the room like a tidal wave. Gasps, murmurs. A reporter's pen clattered against the floor. I closed my eyes for a moment, my throat tight, tears threatening. To hear it spoken aloud, not by me, not by a neighbor, but by a decorated admiral, was more than validation. It was dignity restored. Daniel's face turned pale. His parents leaned forward, their confidence cracking, whispering frantically to his lawyer. The judge leaned back, eyes sharp. "Mr. Warren, do you deny this account?" Daniel stammered, his arrogance flickering. I had obligations. "My family, your family," the judge interrupted, his voice cold, "was giving birth in a car." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Daniel's shoulders stiffened, but he didn't look at me. He couldn't. Inside, I replayed every sacrifice, every insult from his mother, every night I cried myself to sleep while he was working late. All of it led to this moment, where his lies began to unravel in public. Still, I knew it wasn't over. The judge adjusted his glasses, flipping through the evidence. Then he looked up, his gaze cutting across the room like a blade. "Call the next witness." The clerk glanced at the list. "The court calls Miss Cassandra Blake." I froze. The name echoed in my head. Cassandra, the woman from the photographs. The woman whose hand had been on Daniel's arm. Gasps broke out again as the doors at the back of the courtroom opened. High heels clicked against the tile. Heads craned as she walked in, her blonde hair gleaming, her dress expensive and tailored. She walked like someone who belonged on Daniel's arm. I gripped the edge of the table, my pulse roaring in my ears. The mistress had entered the room. The sound of her heels echoed against the courtroom floor. each click puncturing the silence like a warning. Cassandra Blake, Daniel's mistress, walked to the stand with her chin lifted, her eyes darting once to him before settling on the judge. She wore confidence like perfume, heavy and suffocating, filling the air around her. I watched her closely, every nerve in my body taut. This was the woman whose hand had been on my husband's arm while I screamed alone in a car. The woman who had smiled in the photographs while my baby cried his first breaths without a father. The judge's voice cut through the silence. "State your name for the record." "Cassandra Blake," she replied smoothly, her voice like silk over steel. The lawyer leaned forward. "Miss Blake, can you tell the court the nature of your relationship with Mr. Warren?" Her lips curved faintly. "We're friends." A ripple of laughter and whispers swept through the benches. The judge's gavel cracked once. "Order." I clenched my fists under the table. "Friends." The word tasted foul. The lawyer pressed. "Friends? Then how do you explain these photographs? Multiple hotels, trips, nights together?" Cassandra's eyes flickered. She smoothed her dress, leaned closer to the microphone. "Business. We met to discuss investments. His family. They're generous patrons." Daniel's parents nodded, smug, as if the lie had been rehearsed. But the lawyer wasn't finished. He slid another photo across the table, the one of Daniel and Cassandra leaving the hotel at dawn, clothes wrinkled, hair tousled. "Business at 5 a.m.? Gasps swept through the room. Cassandra hesitated, her mask slipping for the first time. Her eyes darted to Daniel. He gave her a look I recognized too well, the same cold, commanding glare he'd used on me whenever he needed me to stay quiet. For a moment, I thought she'd fold. But then her voice wavered. He told me he was leaving her, that it was over between them. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, the scratching of reporters' pens. The judge hammered his gavel. "Order!" I felt my throat tighten, my vision swimming. But I stood, my voice cutting through the chaos. "He already did," while I gave birth to his son. Silence fell like a blade. Daniel's head snapped toward me, his face pale. Cassandra's eyes widened. Her composure shattered. She looked at Daniel, searching for reassurance, but his parents leaned forward sharply, their voices hissing. "This is irrelevant," his mother snapped. "Your Honor, we won't allow—" "Sit down, Mrs. Warren," the judge barked, his gavel cracking again. "One more outburst, and you'll be removed from this court." Mrs. Warren's pearls rattled as she sank back, her face twisted in fury. The lawyer turned back to Cassandra. "So you admit you knew he was married?" she faltered. "He said it didn't matter. He said she wasn't really a wife to him anymore." My chest tightened. I remembered the nights I lay awake waiting for him. The mornings I forced myself to smile through his silence. The sacrifices I made so he could build the life he wanted. And to him, I was already nothing. Cassandra's voice broke. "He promised he'd leave her." The courtroom gasped again. Daniel slammed his hand against the table, his voice raised. "She's lying. She's twisting everything." The judge's gavel cracked once more. "Enough!" My breath shook, but I reached into my purse. My fingers closed around the thin strip of plastic I'd carried with me since that night. Slowly, deliberately, I placed it on the table before me, my son's hospital bracelet. It looked small, almost fragile against the stack of legal documents. But its meaning was louder than any gavel. It was proof, not of affairs or hotel rooms, but of life, of betrayal at the moment that should have been sacred. I lifted it for the judge to see. While he promised her a future, I was giving him one, alone. The silence was electric. Neighbors stared, reporters scribbled, even the bailiff's jaw tightened. Daniel's parents shifted uncomfortably. For the first time, their perfect facade cracked. The judge leaned forward, his eyes cold. "Mr. Warren, do you wish to contest this?" Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came. His face was pale, his fists clenched, his arrogance draining like water through cracked glass. Reporters began to stir, whispers rising into chaos. Pens scratched faster. Cameras clicked. The air vibrated with the sense that something larger was happening. This wasn't just a custody case anymore. It was a story. I caught the eye of a reporter in the front row. She mouthed the headline already forming in her mind. "Millionaire heir abandons wife in labor for mistress." Another reporter whispered to his colleague, already heading for the door. Then another followed. Soon, a half-dozen of them were rushing out, their voices rising, their phones dialing. The story was hitting the press, and for the first time, Daniel's downfall wasn't just mine to witness. It would belong to everyone. The morning after the mistress's testimony, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing endlessly on the nightstand. At first, I thought it was another cruel email from Daniel's lawyer. But when I picked it up, the screen was lit with hundreds of notifications, headlines. Millionaire heir abandons wife in labor. While partying with mistress. Courtroom shock. Admiral testifies against Daniel Warren. The betrayal of a mother. Wealth over family. Every outlet had it. My face wasn't in the photos, but his was, over and over again. Daniel laughing on a yacht. Daniel entering hotels with Cassandra. Daniel standing pale and cornered in the courtroom as the Admiral saluted me. My hands trembled as I scrolled. My entire humiliation, my private pain, was now public record. Yet for the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt seen. The baby stirred beside me, his tiny cries breaking through the shrill beeps of my phone. I lifted him into my arms, pressing him close, whispering, "The world knows now. He can't hide anymore." When I stepped outside later that morning, the neighborhood looked different. Curtains shifted as I walked past, neighbors peeking but not speaking. Mrs. Klein gave me a nod from her garden, her eyes full of something like pride. Down the block, 2 women whispered loudly enough for me to hear. She gave birth in a car. And he was in Greece? Disgusting. For years, I'd been invisible, swallowed by Daniel's shadow, defined by his family's name. Now suddenly I was more than a wife. I was a story people couldn't stop talking about. The fallout spread quickly. A friend texted me a screenshot. Daniel's company had been trending all morning. One by one, business partners announced they were pulling out. The caption under one post read, "We refuse to be associated with a man who abandons his family." I thought back to the sacrifices I'd made for that company. Attending dinners where I was told to smile and say nothing. Hosting events where I was paraded like a trophy. All of that, undone in hours. A strange relief washed over me. Maybe it had never truly been mine to lose. By noon, my inbox filled with messages from strangers. Women I had never met wrote long paragraphs, sharing their own betrayals, their own lonely labors, their own battles against powerful men who thought they were untouchable. One woman wrote, "I was in the hospital alone too. Reading your story gave me strength I didn't know I still had." Another, "They told me no one would believe me. Watching you fight back proves they were wrong." Tears blurred my vision as I read. For so long I thought my pain was mine alone. But it wasn't. It belonged to thousands of women who had been silenced. And now my voice had cracked the silence open. But the higher the headlines climbed, the more vicious Daniel became. By evening, I saw his family's statement on TV. His father stood stiff, his mother by his side, both dressed in their polished perfection. "These allegations are false," his father intoned. "Our son has been the victim of a smear campaign, orchestrated by a bitter woman seeking revenge." I nearly laughed at the word bitter. Bitter was watching your husband's mistress wear diamonds, while you rocked his child in milk-stained clothes. Bitter was selling heirlooms to pay his debts while he spent money on champagne. Bitter was loving a man who had already decided you were disposable. Still, their denial fueled him. That night, as I sat on the couch with my son in my lap, my phone buzzed again, a voicemail. Daniel's voice, ragged with anger. "You think you've won? You think dragging me through the mud will get you sympathy? You've ruined everything. My business, my reputation. Do you even understand what you've done?" His voice cracked into a snarl. "This isn't over." I deleted the message, my hands trembling. My son stirred, his tiny hand curling against my chest as though sensing my fear. I whispered into his hair, "It's not over." But not in the way he thinks. The next day, the whispers in the neighborhood grew louder. At the grocery store, women nodded at me, some even stopping to squeeze my hand. One stranger slipped me a note that simply read, "Stay strong. We're with you." For every gesture of kindness, though, there was venom too. Online trolls called me a gold digger, accused me of fabricating evidence. Daniel's supporters claimed I was destroying a man's legacy out of spite. But their voices didn't matter anymore, because for the first time, mine was louder. By late afternoon, reporters had started gathering at the edge of my driveway, their cameras aimed, waiting for a glimpse. I closed the blinds, my heart pounding, the baby fussing in my arms, and then I heard it, the roar of an engine, the screech of tires as a car whipped into my driveway. Daniel. He stormed out of the driver's seat, his face red, his suit rumpled. Reporters shouted questions, flashes exploding around him. He ignored them, his voice booming across the yard. "You think this is funny? You think you can humiliate me in front of the whole world?" I froze by the window, my son pressed against me, his cries sharp with fear. My body shook, but I forced myself toward the door. Before I could open it, the sound of another engine cut through the chaos. A second car pulled up behind Daniel's Admiral Hayes. He stepped out calmly, his uniform crisp, his expression carved from stone. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. He simply walked forward, placing himself between Daniel and the house, his presence a wall I hadn't realized I'd been praying for. Daniel's fists clenched. "Get out of my way!" The Admiral's voice was steady, commanding, the same tone that had calmed me on the roadside the night my son was born. Not tonight. Not ever again. The flashes of cameras went wild, reporters shouting louder, sensing the confrontation escalating. And as Daniel's face twisted in fury, I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every person watching, every neighbor whispering, every woman who had messaged me. The battle wasn't private now. It was public, and it was just beginning. The night air was sharp, thick with the smell of gasoline and damp earth. Reporters clustered at the edge of the driveway, their camera flashes pulsing like lightning, each burst freezing Daniel's twisted face in white light. He stood just yards from my front door, his voice booming so loud it rattled the windows. "You think you can destroy me?" he shouted, spittle flying. "You think anyone believes your pathetic story?" Inside, I clutched my baby tight, his cries piercing, frightened by the chaos. My chest heaved, every instinct screaming to protect him, but I didn't move toward the door, because Admiral Hayes was already there. He stood in the driveway, steady as stone, his uniform crisp, his presence immovable. He didn't yell. He didn't raise his fists. He only lifted his hand slightly, palm out, a command to halt. "Daniel," the Admiral said, his voice carrying low but unshakable. "You need to back down. Now." Daniel's face twisted, his tanned skin flushed red under the harsh glare of camera lights. His hands curled into fists, his body taut like a cornered animal. "You don't get to tell me what to do. This is my house. My family." His words scraped against me like glass. My house, my family, as if the baby in my arms wasn't flesh of my flesh. As if my sacrifices meant nothing. My heart pounded, but I stayed silent, rocking my son, whispering against his hair. "You're safe. You're safe." The Admiral didn't flinch. "Your rage doesn't scare me, and it won't save you. Walk away before you lose more than your reputation." For a moment, Daniel stood still, his chest heaving. His parents' voices rang out from behind the crowd, his mother's shrill cry, his father's barked orders. "Daniel, don't let them humiliate you. Show them who you are." And that was the breaking point. With a roar, Daniel lunged forward. His eyes were wild, his arms swinging as if he could shove past the Admiral, past the cameras, past the truth itself. Time slowed. I held my breath, clutching my son tighter as the Admiral shifted. He didn't strike. He didn't raise his hand in violence. Instead, he stepped into Daniel's path with precise, practiced control, catching his momentum and holding him still. "Enough," the Admiral growled. The reporters shouted over each other. The sound of shutters firing rapid and chaotic. Daniel writhed, his face red, spitting curses, veins bulging in his neck. His rage was no longer power, it was desperation. Then, in the distance, the sound cut through it all. Sirens. Blue and red lights flashed against the house as police cars pulled into the driveway. Officers rushed out, their radios crackling. For a moment, Daniel froze, realizing too late. The Admiral had called them, minutes earlier, before Daniel ever arrived. He had anticipated the storm. "Mr. Warren," an officer barked. "Step back, now." But Daniel couldn't stop. "This is my life! She's lying!" "They're all lying." He twisted, trying to shove free, but the officers grabbed him. Pinning his arms behind his back, I watched, trembling, as his polished cufflinks, the ones his father had given him on our wedding day, snapped loose and clattered onto the driveway. Tiny silver pieces that had once symbolized wealth and power now lay in the dirt, discarded and forgotten. Symbolism sharp as glass. Everything he clung to, his image, his name, his lies, falling apart piece by piece. "Let me go," Daniel roared, his voice cracking. "This isn't over." His parents screamed from the sidelines, his mother shrieking, his father shoving against an officer. "You can't do this. He's a Warren. Do you know who we are?" But no one listened anymore. Their power was crumbling. Their voices, once commanding, were drowned out by the sirens, the reporters, the truth. I pressed my forehead to my babies, whispering through tears. "It's ending, finally." The Admiral turned once, meeting my eyes. His nod was small, but it carried everything: assurance, protection, resolve. The police dragged Daniel toward the squad car, his feet stumbling, his voice breaking into incoherent shouts. Cameras flashed wildly, capturing every second. Tomorrow, the world would see not a millionaire heir, not a polished businessman, but a man undone, shackled by his own lies. I thought of all the nights I begged him to love me, all the times I silenced myself to keep peace, all the sacrifices I made so he could shine. And now, under the streetlights, I watched him dim. Hours later, the courtroom was silent again. This time no cameras, just the judge, the lawyers, the weight of final decisions. I sat at the table, my baby asleep in his carrier beside me, his tiny breaths the only sound grounding me. Across the room, Daniel sat pale, eyes hollow, his parents clinging to him like lifelines that no longer worked. The judge shuffled papers, his voice solemn. "Based on the evidence, the testimonies, and the conduct witnessed both inside and outside this court, custody is awarded to Mrs. Warren." The words hit like thunder, rattling me to the bone. Custody, final, mine. I felt tears burn my eyes, but I didn't cry. Not here, not in front of them. I only reached down, brushing my son's hair back gently, whispering, "We did it." "You're safe," Daniel's mother gasped. His father slammed his fist against the table. Daniel's head dropped into his hands, but the gavel cracked once more, final and unshakable. And in that moment, everything I had lost, the dignity, the love, the years, transformed into something sharper, something stronger. I had won. The house was quiet now, not the heavy, suffocating silence that once pressed against my chest like a weight, but a gentle silence, the kind that feels earned. Outside, the morning sun spilled across the lawn, warm and golden, filtering through the curtains into the living room. The air smelled faintly of lavender from the candle I'd lit the night before. On the floor, my son lay on a soft blanket, kicking his legs, his little fists punching the air as he cooed and gurgled. His laughter bubbled up, filling the space with a sound so pure it felt like a healing balm against every scar I carried. I sat cross-legged beside him, my hand brushing his hair back as he kicked against my palm. Months had passed since the custody ruling, but the memory still burned vivid, the judge's voice firm and final, awarding me full custody. The gavel that cracked like thunder, silencing his parents' shrieks. The look on Daniel's face as he realized the one thing he thought he could control was gone forever. But now, here, in the glow of sunlight, none of that mattered. What mattered was this: my child safe, my dignity intact, my strength rediscovered, and yet the scars lingered. Sometimes at night, when the house was still, I remembered. The car where I labored alone, the cold note on the counter, the photographs of him smiling with her, my humiliation plastered across headlines. But I also remembered what came after. The Admiral stepping between us in the driveway, the cufflinks clattering to the ground like fallen crowns, the voices of strangers flooding my inbox with support. Proof that silence could be broken, and once it shattered, it was impossible to piece back together. A knock on the door pulled me from my thoughts. I stood, scooping my son into my arms and opened it. Admiral Hayes. He looked the same as the first night I saw him. Calm, steady, the kind of presence that seemed to still the world around him. His uniform jacket was off this time, replaced by a simple shirt. Less a savior now, more a friend. "Good morning," he said, his voice warm. I smiled faintly. "Come in." He stepped inside, his eyes softening as they landed on the baby. "He's grown," I nodded, pride swelling in my chest. "Stronger every day." We sat at the table, the sunlight casting long beams across the wood. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was comfortable, earned. Finally, he broke it. "I wanted to see how you were. Not as a witness, not as an admiral, just as someone who admires what you've survived." I let out a shaky laugh. Survived is the right word. "Some days, I don't even know how I did. You did because you had to," he said simply. Then his voice lowered, steady. "Respect isn't given, it's earned. And you earned it the hardest way possible." His words sank deep, stirring something inside me. For so long, I'd craved respect from Daniel, from his family, from anyone who would see me as more than just a woman who didn't fit their mold. But in the end, I hadn't earned their respect. I'd reclaimed my own. When he left, I walked him to the door. He paused, his gaze lingering on the hallway. His jacket, the one he had draped over me that night on the roadside, when I was bleeding and broken, still hung neatly on the hook by the door. I'd thought about returning it. But every time I reached for it, I stopped. It wasn't just fabric. It was a reminder of dignity restored, of the moment I realized strength didn't come from who stood beside me, but from standing even when I'd been left alone. After he left, I lifted my son from his blanket and carried him into the hallway. I pressed his tiny hand against the jacket sleeve, whispering, "This is where we began again." His fingers curled, gripping the fabric. I held him close, my chest aching with a mix of grief and triumph. I had been abandoned, betrayed, humiliated. I had given up everything for a man who saw me as nothing. But I had risen, stronger, louder, unbreakable, and I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. I set my son down, watching him crawl toward the sunlight spilling across the floor. He laughed, his voice clear, innocent, a sound untouched by the darkness that had nearly consumed me. I turned to the camera, my voice steady. What would you have done in my place? Tell us in the comments and subscribe for more stories. The sunlight glowed brighter, the house alive with my son's laughter, the Admiral's jacket a silent sentinel by the door, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free.